Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for the 7th of August 2013. Welcome to the AVForums podcast. I'm Phil Hinton, editor of AVForums, and joining me for this edition are AVForums assistant editor Steve Withers.
That's some bad hat, Harry.
Games editor Mark Botwright.
Here's to swimming with bow-legged women.
News editor Mark Hodgkinson.
You were on the Indianapolis.
And hardware reviewer Ed Selly.
You yell shark, we've got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.
Getting right to it, and Steve has been lucky enough this past couple of weeks to be pleasuring himself with some very high-end home cinema kit that probably 99% of listeners to this podcast will never be able to afford or have in their homes. And I guess we've been a little bit like Top Gear than this week, Steve, in respect of spending time with kit that's just not realistically possible for anyone other than the super rich to own. But you have been spending time with the Datasat, and at least I know you're skint and you can't even afford a Starbucks, never mind this kit, but you spent a couple of weeks with it. What were your thoughts?
Well, Phil, I mean, you're absolutely right to say that there are times, I think, when you can review what I would call aspirational equipment, and this definitely falls in that category. Yes, most people won't be able to afford it. The processor, the RS20i, costs a cheeky $18,600, and the amplifier that came with it, a 7-channel power amp, the RA7300, that's a further $14,400. So all in total, it's about 32,000 quid's worth of audio kit, not including any speakers or anything like that, just the processor and the amplification. But what I can say is it's quite refreshing sometimes to actually realise that if you do shell out an obscene amount of money, you do get a level of performance, that is prerequisite with that amount of money that you've spent. The RS20i and the RA7300 sounded absolutely incredible. I could honestly say it's the best audio I've ever heard anywhere, and that includes most cinemas. I was in the cinema, I saw 3 films on Friday, and none of them sounded as good as it did when I watched The Hobbit yesterday in my own home cinema. Absolutely incredible. Not only is the processor itself basically the consumer version of the one Datasat make for the cinema, because Datasat bought DTS, so they actually make processors for the cinema. So if you go and see a film in using Datasat's sound system, that's got what's called the AP20 processor in there. This is the consumer version of that, so it's basically exactly the same thing, but a bit more pretty and kind of made to sort of appeal to the consumer. But it's also got what's called DRAC room optimization. That's some incredibly advanced software that basically EQs the entire room. And I mean, I've seen some fairly good room EQ systems in my time, but this is just a whole different level. And the room itself just completely disappears, and the speakers are perfectly tonally matched. Everything sounds incredible. It's just it is kind of refreshing to think, well, okay, it is a hell of a lot of money, but if you've got a lot of money, at least you can get this kind of level of performance. I mean, you can get good performance for a lot less. But the bass management on it was just staggering. I actually discovered 3 rattles in my room I didn't know were there before, and ended up going down to B&Q and buying some of that excluded, a draft excluder stuff you put around door frames, sort of doors from rattling. And that made it sound even better then, because there was no rattles, so just like loads and loads of bass. But yes, I have been pleasuring myself all weekend with that, and it's been an absolute joy.
Giving it back yet?
No, I haven't.
Keeping quiet.
Well, I think, to be honest, one of the problems is that the RA7300 weighs 75 kilos. I kid you not, 75 kilos. I don't know what the hell it's made of. I think it must be from the heart of a neutron star or something. But I think they're probably putting off coming to collect it because someone's got to pick that thing up. I don't know how we're going to get it in the back of the car again.
It's got to be said, there is a childish joy in the ultra high end. Some years ago, I was sent the flagship Wadia CD player that was 4 boxes to play a CD, and weighed that was getting on for 70 odd kilos spread over the different things, and £54,000. And even by that stage, I mean, I still using streamers by that point, but there was a joy in just how over the top the engineering was and some of the things it was capable of doing that had me sort of. Yeah, I mean, even though I don't consider I'll be buying another CD player, I still thought it was really quite something.
There has to be a point, though, where we're talking about diminishing returns with anything, be it video or audio. And certainly when you start getting up to that level, and start comparing it to processors that are maybe £5,000 and above, you're getting in areas most of the time with this high-end kit, Ed, that actually hearing a difference, a lot of that's diminishing returns, really.
Oh, undoubtedly, and it's not just audio. I mean, you can buy a Vauxhall these days, which will do 161 miles an hour. So you're most of the way to the speed of a vastly more expensive sort of Porsche Cayman. But
You're certainly on your way to losing your license.
Well, that as well. But yeah, it applies to everything, and the only person that can make a decision on whether you want to chase that last couple of percent is yourself. You need to make sort of some calm and rational financial decisions and decide if it's for you. I mean, I don't doubt that the $5,000 processors on the market are capable of great things, but there will be a select group of people who are in a position to go, do you know what, I want the best, and I really want to consider the Datasat as one of those options. And we'd from looking at that from the outside, it's only ever going to look irrational, but we all have our decision points. I mean, I could buy a watch that tells the time for less than £10. I like to spend more than that because I value some of the other sort of styling and functionality points of it, and it's the same for so many other things.
How much do you think you need to spend on speakers to match the processor?
Well, no, I mean, I'm using them with BMWs, but the fact is the DRAC EQs the room and the speakers, so you can make just about anything sound good. To be perfectly honest,
sure.
It's got an SVS sub in there. The amount of the bass it's putting out is just staggering. I mean, you sort of wonder. From the surrounds, which obviously don't have any bass response really because they're small bookshelf speakers. You think, well, how is it doing that? Because I know there's nothing back there that can get that low. But it just seems to get it around the room, even the whole room out really well. Just absolutely superb. And I know my room's difficult because it's got a massive node in it at about 50 hertz that you have to deal with. And it did having said that, as Phil pointed out and Ed's just said, you could buy an Anthem receiver for £1,000 and get ARC, which is, well, perhaps not quite as sophisticated as the DRAC system, is really bloody good for the money and does a fantastic job of EQing a room. And obviously that's a lot less money. And again, Anthem's receivers do use realistic power numbers. They'll be only 80 to 150 watts depending on which one you buy. But from my experience, they genuinely are putting out that, and it's not all but to drive to the point where it explodes and take the number just below that. It's they're realistic numbers, and the same with the Datasat kit. But yeah, it's like it's just between buying a Ford Fiesta and buying a Maserati, isn't it? Really, not that I'm calling it Anthem a Ford Fiesta.
Moving on, we're going to talk about LG because we haven't spoken about LG for a little while on the podcast. And they've changed their logo or their tagline from "Life's good" to "It's all possible."
I don't think they've changed it as such. It's a complementary tagline, although I guess more and more of the advertising we'll see will carry it. It's to reflect LG's new age of devices and their new user behaviours. So we're talking mobile devices, we're appy and cloudy, a bit of a jolly advert to launch it. And of course, they're using OLED TV as the poster boy for this in a series of exhibitions and adverts.
How ironic!
Seriously, yeah. It's all possible apart from.
It's all even OLED.
Apart from OLED.
Yeah, and a number of airports around the world that you'll be seeing this happy little message from LG. Interesting news came out of Korea last week. We know it's been on the cards for a while, but they've begun installing a new fabrication plant in Korea, called the M2 Gen 8 facility. And the great news, hopefully, is it will improve yields dramatically, and production processes will be far more streamlined.
Well, let's face it, Mark, right?
Well, it couldn't get any worse, could it?
It couldn't be any worse because yields are
17%.
zero at the minute. This TV, they've been saying, OLED, it's going to be coming out. This was 3 years ago. Last year was it last year, Steve, or the year
Last
before?
May, yeah.
Last May. We were in Monaco. Here's the brand new OLED TV. Never came to market. I was in Korea in February. Here's OLED. Still not in the market. Well, to be fair, it's in Harrods, right? You can go into Harrods and pre-order one. God knows when you're going to get it, but you can pre-order one. And let's just say now that when LG mention OLED, we all go, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
we've
roll
heard
our
that.
eyes, don't we, basically?
I mean, they had the cheek at CES to say, that they're now onto third generation curved screens.
That was brilliant. They go, oh, this is a third generation OLED screen. Okay, right. So what was the first generation? Oh, the ones that we didn't launch last year. Right, okay. Second generation, this one, which is exactly the same as the one last year, but with a different stand. And this is the third generation, which is the curved OLED. So really the same thing 3 times. Not really. Generation means a different, move on in technology, not just a different stand. But anyway, none of that stuff ever came to market, by the way. And now all the other manufacturers have been pushing ahead with them, and LG themselves, of course, have been pushing ahead with 4K. So is there ever going to be any demand, even if they can make OLED TVs in kind of viable numbers? Is there going to be a demand for a 1080p OLED screen at sort of 7 or 8 grand when you can buy 4K Sony or LG or Samsung?
Well, this is where Panasonic is positioning themselves. I think Panasonic are going to jump in with a 4K OLED, aren't they?
Well, they've got a different process to making them as well, which they seem to feel
printed process,
superior printing process. So yes, I mean, I think that Panasonic may, and it's still a gamble, but they may steal a march here. They can come to market next year with 4K OLED at a realistic price.
That seems to be their plan, doesn't it?
That'll be a winner. I think they'll absolutely nail it, because you've got the combination of the high resolution and the incredible image quality of OLED.
That makes me very happy as a concept, it must be said. I mean, it's not normally my speciality area, but the idea of those two technologies together is a very enticing one.
It was also interesting, off the record.
Off the record in public.
Now, please.
Off the record, I'm not going to mention who I was speaking to, but they did have a partnership with Sony, or Sony had a partnership with Panasonic. I'm not going to tell you which side of the fence this information came from, but Sony a little bit colder on the whole 4K OLED thing and seemed to be really pushing just 4K LED screens. Yeah. So interesting they're taking that tact, yet Panasonic seemed to be marching on with this 4K OLED, and I have no doubt, Steve, you're going to see that in a few weeks in Berlin. That's going to be the big thing.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that with IFA coming up in a few weeks, and then obviously CEDIA, we should see a raft of 4K announcemements. Particularly since a lot of projectors get launched this time of year. That's where obviously I'm a big projector fan. I mean, that's a secret. And with projectors and large screen sizes, like as in 10-foot screen sizes, that's where 4K really, really adds value. So for what I'm waiting for are more 4K projector announcements, and I'm really hoping we're going to see that in September.
Will we see one from JVC?
Who knows, Phil? They've got a big press launch range, haven't they? Is it October or September? Yeah,
October. I'm sure that's going to follow on from the stuff's normally announced at CEDIA in the US. Which is towards the end of September, middle of the end of September. Then we've got a European launch event in October, which I've already had an invite to. Really interesting to see what they do this year with the projector line, because funnily enough, normally every 2 years they change the lineup. Last year we went into the third year with the same chassis, which is unusual for JVC.
And they don't normally have big launches, do they? Like they got this year.
No, they don't. So that says to me, if they're using the same chassis for a third year, they're obviously developing something to launch this year coming. So it's going to be interesting. And interesting because the market seems to be moving in a couple of different directions. You've got laser LED DLP projectors. You've got Sony launching a laser LED LCD projector in the professional lineup. So interesting on that side, because I think laser LED is the holy grail that projector owners want, because it's a case of it's instant on, instant off, and it doesn't drop brightness over the life. Well, it does, but it's about 5 to 10%.
Yeah, it's minor though. It's not going to be a major issue.
You're never gonna notice. The other thing is 4K, and being able to get that resolution on a chip. And can they do that with their technology, their DILA technology? Sony have done it with SXRD, but that was a generation from their professional lineup. So it'll be interesting to see that. That's coming up. So
there's also the Red's codename Crimson projector, which is supposed to be coming, which is again 4K and I believe using LED laser hybrid. So that'll be interesting too.
Okay, so interesting times ahead, and IFA coming up next month, which I'm sure we're going to get some big stories coming for that. Steve's going over to Berlin for that show. So that wraps up the hardware news, and coming next is movies. Moving on, and before we get into the movies and what Steve's been to see at the cinema this last week, and he hinted at the fact that he's actually seen 3 films, so we've got to sit through 3 reviews, but never mind. The new Doctor Who, at the time we're recording this on Monday night, last night, Sunday, the BBC revealed who the new Doctor is going to be, and Mr. Botright's going to tell us who it is.
Hey, what?
Who is it?
Is it Peter Capaldi?
It is indeed. So what do we think of this? Peter, the first thing that came in my mind was Tucker and and the swearing. And I'm just thinking, that just makes me want to watch Doctor Who. If you could, Tucker is the Doctor and him just swearing all the way. And
that'd be immense,
how he would deal with aliens and all the rest of it, Now listen here, you
You try that you Dalek, and I will eviscerate you.
What's that accent?
Yeah, he's not Irish. He's not Irish.
This does actually lend to an interesting point, though, doesn't it? And so much as of the more recent Doctors, I'm not off the top of my head. I can't say with such authority about some of the older ones, but Capaldi is the first one which has had such a distinctive and defining role prior to being the Doctor. And I'm not saying for a second Christopher Eccleston in particular hadn't done anything of note, but they were more one-offs and less sort of series based work, which meant he was less identifiable as one thing. And I think this is going to be an interesting one because, yes, as you say, a large quantity of us are just waiting for him to just shout various alien
but
species
probably
to
not
death.
their target audience, which are obviously kids who I hopefully haven't been watching the thick of it. And watching
I'm
Tucker swear his
granted,
tail.
but it's still Doctor Who is one of those things which, for the very fact that we're discussing it on this podcast, it is more than just a children's program. And I think it's going to be interesting because we're associating with something radically different and altogether swearier.
I'm more annoyed about him being chosen, although he's a superb actor and probably a good choice. But he's already been in Doctor Who. He was in an episode called The Fires of Pompeii where he played a character, and he was in Torchwood, which is a Doctor Who spin-off. So now you've had the same actor.
Yeah, but that has happened before, though, hasn't it?
I know. I mean, Karen Gillan, funny enough, was in the same episode as him, The Fires of Pompeii, before she was cast as Amy Pond.
Yeah.
But it's kind of still like, I think if you've been in Doctor Who as anything other than the Doctor, that's it. You can't be the Doctor.
So that's what breaks the suspension of disbelief for you. They've been in it before.
Yeah. I just want some continuity. That's all I want.
A Time Lord, I'm fine. I'm signed up. Hang on, I recognise that face. I'm out.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so we got a few generations here. So who was your Doctor Who? I'll start off. Mine was Tom Baker. And always will be Tom Baker with the scarf and the hat, and because that's who the Doctor was when I was growing up. And I even got my granny to knit me one of those scarves that was 6 foot long, and I was only a few inches high. Yeah, that's my Doctor Who. That's my memories. Hiding behind this sofa on a Saturday night.
It was the Alpha Centauris that used to get me, the potato heads. I was terrified of them as a kid, and that was a Tom Baker episode. Yeah, they're definitely Tom Baker for me. Totally made the programme. I kind of lost touch with it after Tom. Never really took to Peter Davidson particularly, and the less said about Sylvester McCoy, the better, just in general.
I mean, I never really saw any UK television at all until I was 10, so I sort of watched things retrospectively. So for me, it's a toss-up between, I do think Tom Baker, principally because he's Tom Baker, was great. But I have to say, I do rate Christopher Eccleston very highly. I mean, he didn't do that many episodes. And that was a bit disappointing. But there's just a sort of concealed craziness to him, which I've always quite liked and respected. I thought that he was extremely good.
I actually think Matt Smith's been superb. Really, really good. I mean, obviously, total unknown when he was cast, but his physical movement and slapstick and body action is just absolutely genius at times, and he handles the comic elements and the more serious elements very well. Also, because he was only 27 when he was cast, he was very much the same age as his companions. Karen Gillan, the same age as him, and so is Jenna Coleman. Therefore, there's a lot more chemistry between him and his companions, more, frankly, sexual chemistry between them than ever before. And in fact, if anything, it made it difficult for us to believe in River Song and him having a relationship, because she's obviously Alex Kingston, who's in her late 40s. That didn't really work. Now, it'll be interesting to see how they're going to have Capaldi, who's 55, and Jenna Coleman, who's 27, how they're going to interact with each other, given the massive age difference.
Yeah, you would have thought the BBC would have learnt their lesson by now. But...
Well, yeah, quite.
Did you also know there that Steve didn't mention who his Doctor Who was because he doesn't want people to know how old he was?
It was on the radio when it came out.
I said mine's Tom Baker, same as you guys.
Yeah, okay.
Surely it was
I do remember John Pertwee. I do remember John Pertwee as well.
For me, Sylvester McCoy. I'm sorry. You know what? Much maligned, but it reinforces my view that it is whoever was the Doctor when you were a child, and whichever kind of episode scared you the most, those are the ones that you tend to take round with you.
I agree with that totally.
Yeah, okay.
I've kind of lost track of it. I watched the Eccleston ones, and then I lost track of it. As soon as Billy Piper left, I thought, well, there's no point watching this anymore. So that's a new Doctor Who. When is it that he comes on? Is it the Christmas special? Or
yeah, they regenerate in the Christmas special.
Christmas special, all right. So we've got a little bit longer to wait. So why not stick in the Hobbit extended cut? Because that'll take us up to Christmas, won't it? Did we need a longer version of the Hobbit? Really?
It's a Peter Jackson film. What did you expect?
Well,
I thought you were going to say it's a piece of.
How much longer is it? Not much, is it?
13 minutes.
Yeah, that's it. Really worth it, is it?
Yeah, well, I suppose if you're adding 13 minutes onto 13 hours, it's not. Yeah, that's what it feels like.
It's a marketing plot. I mean, it's different with Lord of the Rings, but clearly they were trying to shoehorn an awful lot of plot into even though they were long films, they were still struggling to get everything in there. But with The Hobbit, where they're clearly padding it out.
Yeah, you'll get the next 3 sequels in the next 13 minutes.
It's just. It worked brilliantly for them with the previous films. The idea of the cinema release, then a theatrical cut on DVD at the time, then the extended cut on DVD just prior to the release of the second film or third film at the cinema. So it's a release schedule that's worked very well for them in the past. Clearly, they're replicating it now. I actually watched it, like I said earlier, on Sunday, and although I hated it at the cinema because of HFR, I did thoroughly enjoy it watching it at home. And there's going to be extras on there, and the extras on the previous films were superb. Some of the best DVD extras ever produced. So I'm looking forward to hopefully a relatively honest tale about the making of the film, because obviously it's had a very troubled production.
Thing is, though, Steve, wouldn't you say, given the hardware that we talked about earlier that you were watching it on, would it be fair to say that you could have also sat down and watched back-to-back episodes of Play School, and you'd have probably found that quite exciting as well, given that you apparently enjoying EQ'd perfection and 7 times 300 watts of just animalistic power.
Yeah.
So I might suggest that you sit back down and watch it on a nice home cinema or in a box. I think, come back to us.
I think Play School's probably more preferable to The Hobbit, and I've got a feeling that Mr. Botwright is going to agree with me.
How did you know? Not for me, I'm afraid. No, I'm afraid I never really bought into the whole Tolkien thing. I like fancy games. I used to like the kind of fancy role-playing novels and the like and things like that. But it just swept past me, I'm afraid.
Oh, well. Anyone who is interested in The Hobbit, it's the 4th of November that it comes out on its extended cut. And actually, just quickly mentioning, go back to Doctor Who, 23rd of November is the 50th anniversary special edition, which will be in 3D, the last BBC 3D experiment, and it also has not only John Hurt playing the Doctor, and obviously Matt Smith, David Tennant's coming back, Billy Piper's back. Phil, if you want to catch a bit more of the Piper, so interesting to see how they mix all that together in one special.
It's not a live one though, is it?
No, God, no.
No. We don't want Zoe Ball on again. Jesus.
I tell you what, that's how big though Doctor Who is for the BBC, that they can actually put out a primetime TV show just to announce the actor playing the role.
And it shows you how strong the whole Doctor Who brand is, because I was actually looking across quite a few American tech sites at the time, and they were all watching it and they were all reporting on it. So,
all that worst kept secret ever.
Yeah,
I mean, the bookies stopped taking bets because everyone was putting so much money on Peter Capaldi.
It's the longest running sci-fi series on TV ever, so, and it's got a huge fan base, massive fan base, and sometimes in this country we forget just how popular it is. Certainly in countries like Australia and America, where it has huge followings. So
Peter Jackson's a massive Doctor Who fan. He actually offered to direct the special for nothing.
Can you imagine how long that would be?
Yeah.
Christ almighty. Through Christmas Day, through New Year's.
Yeah, they'd be having a real-time, party like they're doing in Hobbit.
Parties. People walking 4 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's move on to another franchise that's going to be done to death, and that's James Cameron's Avatar. It's been announced that we're going to have an Avatar 2, 3, 4, $1 billion budget, and release dates of 2016, 2017, 2018.
I think that sums it up for me as well. I think it's very hard to describe how little I care about that announcement. I have seen every single minute of the original one, but not sequentially, and I can't be asked to make the effort to do so now. It just leaves me cold.
I just find the budget $1 billion. I mean, I know there's a precedent for relatively large budgets. I think the second and third Pirates of the Caribbean movies were shot back to back, and that was like a $500 million budget. But $1 billion, that's some serious money.
You could almost
paint, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, you could almost afford some Datasat kit with that budget.
But you could go to Pandora for real on that kind of budget, couldn't you?
Well, that's going to be the second announcement. He is actually going to shoot it in space.
Well, I wish Cameron should go, having already been to the deepest part of the ocean on his own with 3D cameras and lighting rigs. I want to send him into space next. That's what we should be doing with that guy. Guy's a legend. I mean, he is just an absolute legend. I love Cameron. I mean, James, not David. Not blocker Cameron.
I'm glad you qualified.
Yeah, I've got to say, I absolutely no interest in this. And the appeal of Avatar was that it was in 3D, and it was the first 3D film really that hit the cinema in this recent digital age. And I think people just went to see it because of that fact. And it brought in quite a bit of money. But, in terms of storyline, in terms of what he was actually saying in that, it was just drivel. Absolute.
Well, it was Fern Gully, if you remember that from the 90s. It was actually the Fern Gully.
Yeah, totally agree with you. It was a pile of shit.
In these press releases about the sequels, I haven't seen anyone anywhere mention the fact they're going to be in 3D or in any kind of higher frame rate, which is interesting.
You can guarantee it's going to be 60 frames a second, HFR 3D. You can guarantee it. Cameron will do it.
He might do, but is anyone going to care?
No, but he'll do it. This is
James.
James.
60 frames a second. He's going to bugger it up for us in Europe, isn't he?
This is James Cameron. He'll do what he wants. He's king of the world, So
I don't know if this doesn't come off. He all of a sudden he'll be back to doing Piranha 3. So that'll be interesting to see. I don't know. It's been quite a long time, and there's been quite a lot of cooling down of interest in 3D. And I don't know. I think it's not. I'm sure that the film studios see it as a no-brainer. I'm less convinced that that's necessarily the case.
Well,
especially spreading it across
I've learned, Ed,
films.
over the last few years, is never ever underestimate James Cameron. When he was making Titanic, I remember thinking this is going to be a disaster. The Abyss was a failure.
Well, it sunk.
Well, yeah, with the film. But I just thought that this is
no sequel there.
$200 million on a film about Titanic.
Is that genuinely? But is that genuinely not underestimating James Cameron, or is that never overestimate what people will actually go out and spend money on?
But he makes Titanic. There's no stars at the time. DiCaprio was not a star when that film was made. No stars. $200 million.
He was a known name.
No, he's never going to carry a $200 million film, though. So no stars. Everyone knows how it ends. There's no chance of a sequel. There's no real merchandising possibilities. And they spent $200 million making it. You're thinking that's going to lose a fortune. Biggest money-making film of all time by a country mile, wins 11 Oscars. Bloody hell. 12 years later, she comes back with Avatar. You're thinking, well, that's going to fail. It's Fern Gully, as just pointed out. It looks terrible in the trailers. That brilliant, meme with Hitler ranting and raving about it. You're thinking, another disaster. No, biggest film of all time by a country mile, even more than Titanic. So Cameron, he's got his finger on the zeitgeist that no one else has.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Like both those instances, they were essentially standalone projects that were, they intrigued by their nature. One, because you thought, how can you make a film out of something which is a depressing and well-known historical event, and then how can you rehash a 90s kids made for TV film? Whereas
films.
He's coming back to the same and this is asking lightning to strike twice, and I'm not. Yeah, that's a bigger ask,
twice,
especially when you're asking to do it three more times. Yeah.
You see, I don't know why Hollywood bother, because the biggest movie of all time is going to open on Wednesday of this week as this podcast goes out, and it's Britain's very own lovable Alan Partridge in Alpha Papa.
I'm sure it'll be brilliant.
It's time for big
going
school
to see it.
Back of the nets.
It's Alexei.
We could be here all night with who.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, though, I've seen the trailers and I will go and see it this week, ready for next week's podcast. But I kind of get the feeling it's probably going to play a lot better on TV than it will at the cinema.
I
must admit to some slight concerns about the transition from TV to film. I'm a massive Partridge fan. Obsessive in my younger days.
I think he's had long enough to develop this one that I'm hoping that it is just wall-to-wall quotable fun. Basically.
That's what it needs to be. That's what it needs to be, up there with the TV series, doesn't it? Partridge is at its best. It's just a quote every 30 seconds. So this film's got to maintain that pace somehow and keep interest. It slightly worries me, but I'll go and see it. But yeah.
Dredd. A lot of fans on this podcast, and there is now a petition underway for a sequel, and it was something that Chris was very keen on and was hoping that the Blu-ray sales were going to be high enough, because it did bomb at the cinema, to persuade the makers to do a sequel. It looks like it might happen, Steve.
Well, definitely the DVD and Blu-ray sales have been really big, much larger than anticipated or even hoped for. It's been a huge hit on Blu-ray and DVD, which definitely helps. I mean, there's a long history of movies that have failed at the cinema and then found a home in the home video market. Blade Runner is a good example. A film
I'll give you
movies.
I'll give you the best example ever, and that's
Shawshank
Redemption.
Yeah,
it absolutely bombed, and it was only on video that
it found an audience. And there's also a big history of films that have done quite well at the cinema and then very well on home video, and have got a lot of love for them. And then their sequels, which invariably aren't very good, have been massive hits. I mean, basically, Matrix was a decent sized hit and got a lot of word of mouth afterwards, and was very popular on home video. Matrix 2, not a good film, but a massive hit because of the affection for the Matrix. Same with the second Pirates of the Caribbean movie. So there's no question that I think if you given the amount of sort of affection and love for Dredd, the movie, there's definitely a market out there for a sequel, and I think it will do much better than Dredd did at the cinema, because there's a lot of people now who've seen Dredd either on Sky or on DVD or on Blu-ray. I watched it bizarrely. I watched it at the weekend because my sister and her husband hadn't seen it, so we watched it, and it is a great movie. It's a really good adult comic book film.
Haven't seen it yet.
By adults for adults.
Haven't seen it yet.
You should watch.
And the 3D was actually watchable in this.
Yeah,
as well. It was one of those 3D movies that was really nice to watch.
So I think they could keep the budget reasonably tight. They could have a hit on their hands.
I don't know. I it's the kind of film that I wonder whether a sequel might kind of just taper off, because there's got to be a huge amount of people who are buying into just the general, procession of comic book films and would have picked up Dredd. I know there are quite a lot of people who did find it excessively violent, who didn't quite understand what Judge Dredd was at its core, quite how nihilistically ruthless as a vision it was.
There's no question that the R rating of the 18 certificate in this country worked against it in terms of box office, because it obviously cut out a large percentage of their possible audience. Being that most people are going to see movies these days are like 15-year-olds. So
I wouldn't want to see it made if it was going to be some diluted stuff.
No, I mean, that was the appeal to me. It was the fact it was so hard-edged with lots of strong language and really strong violence in it. I mean, it was a film I never thought they'd make. I never ever thought they'd make a Dredd film like that. You just don't think it's going to happen. So the fact they did is just a miracle in itself. So if we get a sequel to that, that'll be a bigger miracle. After that, it'll be the second coming. I think that's the only thing left, really.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I wonder if Carl Urban's face can take it for another 90-minute film. That sneer, the way...
that's got to be uncomfortable. So, you never know. You never know.
Family Guy came back.
Yep, twice.
and he said there will never be a movie, which is great, because I think that would just ruin it, to be honest.
I don't know. On BBC Three last night, there was the 200th episode documentary partnering thing, and he was saying that that he had something in mind, but it explicitly had to be something they couldn't do on television. So Christ only knows what they're thinking about there. But he appears to be mellowing in that regard, presumably because he's envisaging a steamer trunk full of $100 bills.
Well, he had the success with Ted, so I think that's where he's going to go with.
Now he's doing that Western, isn't he?
Yeah, he's doing the Western thing. So latest series of Family Guy actually on BBC Three at the minute, which is turning out to be really quite good. Last year was a bit hit and miss.
Yeah,
but the ones I've seen this time around, really good. Also, talking about TV while we're still on TV, October 31st for the new Sherlock. 3 episodes, feature length. Are we excited?
I am.
Yeah, definitely.
My wife isn't, but
that's. I mean, it's a brilliant show. Absolutely, Stephen Moffat, who also is the showrunner of Doctor Who, of course, he's one of those guys that's a bit smug and not as clever as he thinks he is. But he definitely, along with Mark Gatiss, they did a brilliant job of updating Sherlock Holmes for the modern age. And although I can no longer look at Benedict Cumberbatch without thinking about Ed's words about a hyper-intelligent potato, he is a brilliant choice to play Sherlock, and Martin Freeman makes a perfect foil for him.
The casting is well, I mean, you've got to say you couldn't ask for better. You have to delve deep into sort of hypothetical thought, but it is a fantastic choice for the 2 lead roles.
I think it absolutely looks beautiful as well. The production values are absolutely astounding. For a BBC production, it is beautiful to look at, and I love the fast cutting and the use of new technology. When he's using the smartphones and stuff, and the way that they convey what it is that he's looking at on screen, and then how his thought process is then working out what's going on. I think it's brilliant the way they put it together.
Sorry, in the books, John Watson is injured fighting in Afghanistan. And obviously in the TV show, he was also injured fighting in Afghanistan. So the more things change, the less they actually do.
It's interesting. Whilst they're still working for Future Publishing, who are just to one side of Baker Street, it did become quite tiresome explaining that the Speedy sandwich bar, which is the front of the 221 in this version of Sherlock, is actually just outside Euston Square station, so that the idiots who got off looking for it have in fact got off one station
actually,
too far.
as a slight aside there, Ed, I used to work for Abbey National, whose head office actually was 221B Baker Street. Every now and then you walk down to the lobby reception area and find Japanese tourists wandering around trying to find Sherlock. They actually had to employ a secretary whose only job was answering all of Sherlock Holmes's mail, and she would write back to everybody and tell them he's retired and lives on the south coast.
That's an awesome job.
They should have just employed someone dressed up as Sherlock Holmes and gone there bloody
They did that, but they did it a bit further up the road. There was a museum a bit further up Baker Street, not 221, but that's claimed to be 221, although it wasn't actually. And they had a guy standing outside dressed up as Sherlock Holmes with a deerstalker in the pipe.
Someone's got to do it.
And moving things on quickly, Fargo, TV series, Coen Brothers, Billy Bob Thornton. This caught my attention today. I don't know if it caught anybody else's attention. This sounds epic.
It's been a long time since the film, though. That's the only concern.
Yeah, wasn't the main thing about the film Frances McDormand, anyway?
But isn't that a good thing?
Yeah, I think that is a good thing. I was going to say exactly the same thing.
They've kind of disconnected from it. If it was too soon, people would be expecting, kind of thematic threads running through it. Whereas now they've got a decent distance from the original story. So that I think they can pretty much run with whatever they want there.
Yeah, I bought into all that small town America, the whole feel of it. I love the film; it was a great movie. I bought into the whole feel of the desolate Midwest and all the rest of it. Yeah, fantastic, the film. And I'm excited. Excited to see what the Coen brothers can do with TV when they haven't got the boundaries of film. So it should be interesting.
And a woodcutter.
And a woodcutter. Yeah,
I'm fine with the Coen.
I'd love to see Steve Buscemi in it, but I think that's unlikely.
Didn't he end up in a woodcutter?
No, he was the one feeding him in, wasn't he?
Oh, no, he wasn't the one. He was the one being fed into it.
Was he? Can't remember now.
Yeah, it was Peter Stormare who was feeding him in.
Cracking film. The black comedy in it was just unbeatably good.
Yeah, it was very funny.
Okay, so rounding up on the movies quickly because we're fast running out of time this week. So, Steve, what's at the cinema?
A busy week, actually, Phil. Last week we had actually 4 cinema releases, although one of them wasn't at my local cinema. That was Only God Forgives, which is the new Ryan Gosling, Nicholas Winding Refn movie, who made made Drive together. I'm sure Kaz will be covering that on the site anyway at some point quite soon. I went to go and see Red 2, The Heat and The Conjuring. Red 2 is obviously a sequel to Red. Unusual that they've actually used a 2 in the title, because these days I figure everyone just has a subtitle rather than a numerical suffix. But it's basically Red stands for Retired Extremely Dangerous. It's about a bunch of retired CIA spies and contract killers who end up, being chased around the world because of some plot. It's got Bruce Willis in it. Most of the returning cast, actually. So Bruce Willis, John Malkovich, and Helen Mirren, who plays an ex-MI6 operative who's now a contract killer. It's one of those films. The original film was mediocre, got mediocre reviews, did okay at the box office. Somehow they've made a sequel. I'm not quite sure why they bothered. Again, it's fun. It's very bland. It's okay. Bruce Willis is pretty much sleepwalking through the entire film. Mirren's great. You've got Anthony Hopkins and Brian Cox. That's not Professor Brian Cox. That's the actor Brian Cox, who both, of course, play Hannibal Lecter on screen, and they're in a scene together, which is quite nice to see if you're a sort of a cineast. It's an okay movie. It's fun in places. The plot's actually not too bad. The acting's okay, but it's kind of the kind of film that you'd probably enjoy more watching on DVD or Blu-ray on a boring, sort of wet Sunday evening or something. So probably not bother going to see the movies for that one. The Heat is a buddy cop, mismatched buddy cop comedy movie, which have been doing the rounds now for at least 30 years, since back in '82 with 48 Hours. Bizarrely, I'm not aware of anyone ever doing it with two women, which is the kind of the unique thing about The Heat. It's Sandra Bullock and Melissa McCarthy who play. Sandra Bullock plays a sort of an uptight FBI agent. Melissa McCarthy is this kind of very foul-mouthed police detective. And they end up joining up together to go and try and catch a drug dealer. I thought it was absolutely hysterical. Easily the funniest film I've seen all year. It's made by Paul Feig, who directed Bridesmaids. It's written by one of the writers on Parks and Recreation. Sandra Bullock's a really, really gifted comedian who, unfortunately, has picked some dodgy movies in the past, but she's superb in this. Really, really funny. Melissa McCarthy is hysterical. She gets all the best lines. And it was an absolute hoot from beginning to end. So definitely recommend that one if you fancy a really good laugh. Go and see it with the wife. And finally, The Conjuring, which is not, as the title might suggest, about magicians. It's one of those annoying films that claims to be based on a true story, which, when it's utter cobblers, obviously, anything that involves supernatural clearly isn't going to be true because there's no such thing. It's one of these things where the people involved were also involved in the Amityville horror story that's already been proved to be complete rubbish. But apparently this happened before the Amityville horror and was so terrifying they haven't mentioned it for 40 years. Yeah, right. The annoying thing is, even though I really hate these kind of films that claim to be true when they're obviously not, the film itself, whilst being massively derivative, is actually genuinely quite scary in places and very effective. Again, I'd probably recommend. What I'd forgotten till I was sat in the cinema is how much fun it is seeing a scary movie with an audience. Much more fun than watching it on your own, and probably slightly less scary than watching it on your own. But yeah, I definitely remembered for the first time in a long time just how much you can enjoy both watching a comedy with an audience, because The Heat, everyone was laughing along with you, and then in The Conjuring, everyone's obviously jumping out of the seat at the same time. Is it worth going to see at the movies? I'd probably wait for it on, unless you want to get that kind of shared experience at the cinema. Pick it up on Blu-ray or DVD. It's actually an effective horror film. I just get really annoyed when people try and claim it's based on a true story when it obviously isn't.
Like the Bible.
Like anything like that. It's just people being gullible idiots. All religions.
Yeah, let's not go there. So you enjoyed it with an audience, Steve. I take it you went and seen all three of these movies on the same day on your own.
I did, and I had a curry sort of 2/3 of the way through.
Oh, dear me.
After the first two movies.
He was on his own by the end of the last movie.
Yeah, that's when it got really scary.
So Red 2, you said it had something of a plot. Was that right, or did I?
Yeah. The plot actually wasn't too bad. There was. I'm not going to give too much away, but they're basically the basic premise is that there's a nuclear bomb that was smuggled into Moscow during the Cold War, and they're trying to find it, and there's a bunch of people trying to kill the main characters, and they're being chased by a Korean hitman. Oh, interestingly, there's a brief sequence in Hong Kong where you can see my apartment. You can actually see my apartment block.
Christ almighty.
Worth it for that alone, then, eh?
Yeah, that's the only reason I went to go and see it, basically. Because it's also in the trailer, that particular sequence. I thought, that's where I used to live.
I was amazed that you managed to get through the story about the bank and the Japanese tourists without saying. I ran downstairs and said, I used to live in Japan.
That was before I lived in Japan. Red 2's okay. It's some nice action sequences in it. Helen Mirren's good. Anthony Hopkins is in it, playing a loony scientist.
What is it with Bruce Willis these days? Every interview he does is just an absolute wonder.
Clearly, in the film, he just doesn't care. Does he need the money that badly?
Did you see him on the One Show?
Yeah, that was terrible.
Oh, Jesus.
I mean, they were awful interviewers. In all honesty, the questions they were asking were appalling. But he was there contractually and just wanted to be anywhere else. But even in the film, his performance is he's sleepwalking through it. You've got John Malkovich, who's like at least trying to be funny, and play a bit kooky. Helen Mirren, you still would, wouldn't you? I mean, she looks fit as a butcher's dog, even in the late 60s. Yeah, probably.
You would have.
To be fair, Stephen is in those late 60s as well.
Anything with a pulse, Steve?
Catherine Zeta-Jones turns up with about an inch of makeup on. She
just turns up, does she?
No, she plays a Russian agent. But honestly, I was looking at thinking, if it had been a projector at home, I'd be going, hang on, these colours are off. Our flesh tones are definitely not flesh tones. But she's caked up with makeup. She's starting to look her age, and she's only my age. But it was quite weird. I don't know if that was some sort of creative decision. But yeah, she's in it as well. There's actually quite a few. Stephen Burkoff pops up for about 5 seconds and then gets killed. David Thewlis turns up playing a character called the Frog, but he's not a Frenchman. It's a bizarre film at times, but it's a fun. Like I said, on a wet Tuesday evening, a bit bored.
A Tuesday now, not a Sunday.
It's changed from Sunday now. It's gone down the ratings.
Yeah, okay, right. Time to shut up, Steve, and let's move on.
I was shut up. You asked me a bloody question.
Oh no, that's
I was done.
Open Pandora's box.
Oh no, I just thought.
Is that the name of the Avatar?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Pandora's box.
We're back to Vista now.
Oh, that would be a brilliant Avatar 2 Pandora's box. That'd be fucking brilliant.
Why did you not say that?
When you said that during the bit about Avatar?
I can't turn it on, gents. It's just when it happens.
So we move on to the world of games, and Mr. Botwright, what is happening? Obviously, games podcast coming up next week, so we don't want to give too much away. But what is happening in terms of games?
In terms of games, it's fairly quiet in terms of everyone's really gearing up for the big release of GTA 5 and the next-gen consoles. But there are a couple of interesting little stories. We're talking about the Dredd and the online petition, and we've previously touched on Kickstarter and crowdfunding and that kind of thing. Devil Survivor 2, a little kind of Japanese role-play game for the DS, looks like it's going to get a release in the UK, but publishers Ghostlight are asking for pre-orders before they actually commit to release it. So it's an interesting kind of little side story to this modern democratization of gaming through things like Kickstarter, in that they're actually trying to get people on board and pledge money before they actually make a decision, which is...
So is that pledging money, or is that actually giving them money?
That's actually paying up front, actually, I should say, rather than actually pledging. They're saying if they don't get... They only want 1,800, apparently, pre-orders, so therefore, they should probably get that, but that's by 30th of August, so it's a pretty limited market.
How much are they asking
1,800 by what?
By 30th of August, and they want $24.99, I think it is. So much it's going to cost.
Right, so let's test the banker.
Oh, me?
Yep.
£25 by 1,800.
Yep.
Start tool accessories.
Yeah. So this banking
it's
job
about
that you had,
50 grand, isn't it?
50 grand. Okay.
Not a lot, actually.
It's about a night in the town as a banker, is it not? once you
along with the
factor in
cocaine and the hookers.
and the hookers, and that's what they're looking for, Mark. This, if it was me and I was a fan of the game and they were given a guarantee that if the target was reached, they would produce the game, I might be more inclined to give my money up front. Have they given any guarantees that they will do it?
Yeah, I think that, they're obviously a pretty main. Well, they're a known publisher, so that they would say that they are definitely going to do it if they get the money. It's a good idea. It kind of gets the ball rolling, and that's just for like the first run, and then afterwards you would think they would be pretty much self-funding. But it's quite just a little weird side note to this whole idea of crowdfunding, and you've actually now got a proper business, a bona fide business, not just some guy in his bedroom asking for money to make something, not a group of kind of, oddballs deciding that they're going to come up with some madcap invention. This is someone who's already invested in the world of publishing games, saying that, they've looked at other avenues and they couldn't do it without getting people to put the money up front.
I often wondered if with some Blu-ray releases, particularly the more esoteric titles, you see them get announced, and then quite often the release date gets pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And I'm wondering if it's because they're waiting to get to a certain number of pre-orders before they commit to actually pressing the discs.
Yeah, lots of really kind of niche ones as well, in kind of obscure publications and that kind of thing. They tend to do that, and then they're just going to fizzle away and never actually come out. And
exactly. Yeah, they just never turn up, do they?
Yeah,
you think they never get enough interest.
Yeah, I mean, there is a very good piece on the site right now that Leon's written about the power of social media and gaming. Everyone should read that. But yeah, it's kind of this weird state with films and with games at the moment that you have got this kind of consumer power, like with the Dredd petition, and you even got the classic kids TV show Nightmare turning up on YouTube's Geek Week. Has anyone else watched that?
I did look at the link you sent, but I had absolutely no idea what you're talking about, Mark.
How could you not? I can't be the only one who loved Nightmare.
I have no idea what you are talking about.
No idea.
It was like a kind of augmented reality before augmented reality kid show, like a kind of fancy thing. They'd have to wear the helmet and then they'd be guided through.
Was it a kid show when you were a kid?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, everybody else on this podcast is at least 40.
I was too busy doing cocaine and hookers.
Speak for yourself.
That's nowhere near 40, is it?
I remember Nightmare as a kid as well. I just hated it. If I'm honest, I thought it was absolutely
How
shit.
could you?
You're talking to people who watched Rent-A-Ghost, for Christ's sake.
Now that was good.
And Crackerjack.
Yeah.
I just thought it.
And Record Breakers.
And Jimmy Savile.
The thing is, when you actually think Nightmare is one of those things which you get nostalgic about, and you think, oh, there was giant spiders and all sorts of things. Actually, the majority of it was like watching paint dry. And
have you watched the latest episode? Have you watched the episode they've put together?
Well,
it's brilliant. They've got the original Trey guard back. There's the helmet of justice. They got the knapsack and the spell casting. It's absolutely brilliant. I hate nostalgia for nostalgia's sake, but I genuinely think they should bring it back.
I think they should bring back what is it? The Crystal Maze.
Clangers.
Crystal Maze.
Crystal Maze was weird. Crystal Maze was like some kind of weird register for oddball presenters. Keep them all in one place.
Well, he was an oddball. That's why everybody liked him. He was an oddball. But I think they should bring it back for the 21st century and actually make it life and death. The challenges.
Is it true that the Sony might limit the number of PS4s available? That there's so many pre-orders coming in now that the only initial pre-orders are going to get met in December.
Yes, it is. I think it's pre-ordered by about August the 5th, and then you'll be guaranteed to get one on release day. But there's lots of talk that they're doing it intentionally, that it's this idea of, restricting supply, and then you push up demand.
I don't think it's that. Do you? I mean,
how come
they're launching multi?
Didn't that happen with
how many countries
the Xbox
they're launching
360? Didn't that happen with the Xbox 360 when that was first launched?
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past them, because then why then are people saying that there should be units there available to buy on the day? If there's going to be deliveries on the day, and if there's going to be units rolling into the store on release day and the like, and there will be excess there, why would you then say that you have to pre-order by a certain date? That doesn't really tally up for me. It's like saying there has to be a certain percentage that can get it via pre-order, and then there's a certain amount that you're. Yeah, I know, but why wouldn't you give everything for pre-orders and then just Joe Schmo walks off?
Well, they know to get people into stores, they'll buy a load of they'll buy a load of games in a bundle because they'll have no bloody choice.
What's a markup on eBay, won't you?
Yeah,
is it not that you also want to generate a news story of thousands of idiots queuing outside?
Yeah, there's a bit of that as well, I think.
Yeah, that's it.
And then they'll magically find a container full of them on the week before Christmas, but they'll bump the price up by at least 40 quid.
The same as an Xbox One, could be, prospectively, on eBay.
Yeah. Oh, Christ, there's going to be a trade in them. In both, I think there's going to be scalpers
I think eBay is going to be
all the way. This Christmas, it's going to be because there's no way.
It's nightmare, isn't it, this Christmas?
There are so many different kind of rumors going around about problems with production and the like. A different one comes out every week that most of it's absolute rubbish. But I'd be very surprised if they're totally ready for the demand for these things.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think they'll have. They're not going to have an unlimited supply, are they? So.
Or the cynical side of you says they haven't got enough pre-orders.
Yeah, there's that. There's the possibility because nobody ultimately. I think the point is that if you've got two rival consoles, no one wants to be the one that you see dozens of them lining up the storefronts, and everyone wants to be the one that says sold out. You want to drive that idea that in fact yours is
everybody
the one
wants what they can't have.
Yeah, I mean just think of Tracy Island.
No, the Tracy Island thing, yeah.
Yeah, but Blue Peter isn't going to step into the breach and tell you how to make your own next-gen games console, though.
I don't know.
Have you seen it recently, yeah?
No, I confess I'm making
it's very modern these days.
Well, I mean, it'd be easy enough because all you have to do is build a PC. That's all it is, isn't it?
Get yourself a Raspberry Pi
in a smart box.
You can make it out.
Doing papier-mâché, is it?
Well, you could do
that. It looked effective.
Yeah, you could do that with your Frosty's box and stuff and make it look.
Okay.
That's not going to wash on the kids of today, though.
You're going to get some serious tears on Christmas Day if that's what you give them. and frankly, quite rightly so, you tight bastard.
Don't call me tight. I spent £600 on a pram today.
How much?
6.
I hope you've got kids.
Well, there's one on the way. No, I bought it for my.
Otherwise, that's one hell of an impulse purchase.
It's like the character in About a Boy who's trying to pick up girls.
£619.
You got one that faces you or faces away.
Oh
God!
It does everything. It has everything
except spins.
objectivity. It's really, really quite something. And the chassis is seam welded like a racing car, which appealed to me.
How fast are you going to be pushing it?
Hang on. So what you're actually saying is you could have bought one for 50 quid, but you spent 600 quid or something because it was cool.
It is possible to spend less, but this one was hella.
I just kind of get my head around how a pram costs 600 quid.
It started at about 200.
Which your kid's going to grow out of in a year.
No,
really?
You can't help that, can you?
Jesus Christ, we're in the wrong business, guys.
Use this one all the way through. It becomes a pushchair in its defence, so I can get years of misery out of this one. So yeah, that was a calculated decision.
All right, fair enough.
So,
well, what you do worry about is if the missus says no, it needs to be a double one.
Thankfully, that particular demon has been put away. So because my wife is an identical twin, and there are lots of non-identical twins in my family, so I was justifiably concerned. But there is only one on the way, unless it's like Quarto in Total Recall.
So you can never be totally sure.
It must be said, I actually today, it's completely off topic, I did buy one of those sling things that you stick your long-suffering in.
A papoose?
Yes, and one of the reasons I chose the one I did is because you can put the baby both ways round, so I can actually do a Quarto thing. So, as you can see, I'm well cut out to be it. So, yeah, it's going to be brilliant.
Do we phone social services now, or what?
No, you have to wait until I've actually done something wrong. I'm sorry. It's not, the intent isn't enough, I'm afraid.
I think
so that's your Halloween costume sorted then, is it?
You know that.
So some quick tech news, guys. What about the Moto X?
Moto X, who cares?
I would quite like one, but that doesn't really count.
It's just a mid-range phone.
What's this? Oh,
the Moto X that Google managed to drum up so much hype about.
I've got to say, the picture on the front of the site was the thing that put me off most.
Well, you like the wooden look?
The wooden back, and then the little bracelets on the wrist, and then he's sitting on a grifter. It just screams hipster that I want to punch.
That's Steve.
Would you say, Mark, that you didn't get wood?
I definitely got no word about the Moto X. No, it's just a boring mid-range phone that does Google Now on demand, basically. And if it hadn't been for Google buying Motorola, you would never heard of it.
Pram news.
Pram news done.
That's not going in, surely.
How many wheels does it have?
4.
At least have
three or four, yeah. You got a four-wheeler, good.
Does it have an engine at least?
It
I
doesn't.
want it to be like a baby Segway for that
The
money.
front wheels can be locked in place for better off-road ability.
They all do that, even the
Well,
200 quid one said.
Better off-road ability. Are you,
Well, if you take a McLaren one off-road, if the wheels keep wobbling around, they get jammed up with mud and crud and they don't work properly. So you can lock them in
how
place.
far off-road are people
lock them,
taking
Cloud.
these prams?
I don't know. I live next to the Grand Union
Just
Canal,
for
and if I
people
want
who
to take
Buys
Julia
a
to the pub,
McLaren
I have-
pram.
Drop kids down the long staircase and try and race them to the bottom or something.
Oh, what can I say? I was taken in by this feel. I spent £600 on a pram. I will live with that.
You won't be the last. You won't be the last.
No,
If the
absolutely.
kid hates it though,
He isn't going to have any choice. And
Right.
besides,
I don't know. No, there are
And you
some
can't
kids.
speak, so you stop.
No, there are some kids that literally will just refuse to get into certain prams.
You got
So
to
you just batter
overpower
them.
them.
bit of battering will do the trick. That's what I did when I was a kid.
the other thing, as a lazy person, that did appeal. Don't want to keep going on about this. That you can can actually just physically drop the car seat into the same locking.
Yeah,
clamps.
that is a big blessing, as you'll find. That was a nightmare getting the first car seat in the back of the car with the first one. Didn't know what we were doing. Should have rehearsed. Retrospectively, it took us about 40 minutes.
Never left you out of the hospital, should they?
Yeah, no, probably not.
On that bombshell of pram news, that is the AVForums podcast for this week. My thanks to Mark Botwright.
Here's to swimming with bow-legged women.
Now you've done that one.
Done that.
Oh, what? We got to pick another one.
Yeah, you got to have a different.
Hang on, where there? Google. God damn.
Anyway, also thanks to Steve Withers,
Smile, you son of a bitch.
Mark Hodgkinson,
Hooper, stop playing yourself, Hooper.
and Ed Selly,
This is not the time or place to perform some kind of half-assed autopsy on a fish.
and back to Mark Botwright.
Hang on, it's loading. Where there? No, just leave.
I can give you a million of them.
Oh, shut up. Right. I don't have to take this abuse much longer. No.
Very apt.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter at AVForums, also facebook.com/AVForums, and bookmark avforums.com for the latest news, reviews, and videos. Plus, why not leave us a rating on iTunes if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.